Welcome to Horror Audio Series, where the veil between worlds grows thin, and every whisper might be a warning. Here, we don't just tell horror stories. We summon them. Turn down the lights. Turn up your fear. The nightmare begins now.
Some deaths refuse to rest. Some spirits refuse to leave. When the veil thins between the worlds, the soul possessor awakens. Welcome to Soul Possessor.
Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dark. The night returned not as a veil, but as a suffocating presence. Thick and suffused with dread, draped over the village like a funeral shroud soaked in ink. From the northern mountains, an icy wind slithered down through the forest, threading through Enthaistar. The gnarled willows and dry bamboo like a serpent searching for prey. It brought with it the stench of damp earth, half-burned joss sticks, and something else, something stale and metallic, like blood dried on rusted steel. The moon never rose. Only the stars blinked faintly behind a ceiling of moving fog, and the wind made the houses creak as if they were whispering to one another, muttering secrets not meant for human ears. Doors rattled without cause. Shadows stretched longer than they should. And every corner of the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something unnamed to arrive. Inside a small wooden cabin near the edge of the forest, Christina sat hunched beside a dwindling fire, tending a pot of thick, bitter-smelling medicine for her mother. The flames hissed gently beneath the clay pot, casting long, flickering shadows across the warped wooden floor and the soot-stained walls. Her hands moved rhythmically, stirring, adjusting, careful not to let the mixture burn. The scent of boiling roots and dried bark filled the house, a smell she had known all her life, but tonight it carried a strange edge, as if something dead was steeping with the herbs. She wore a faded wool sweater, sleeves stretched and threadbare, her hair tied back loosely. Her face was weary, not from fatigue, but from the weight of memory. Her eyes, dark and watchful, stared into the dancing firelight, looking for answers it could not give. Outside, the wind clawed at the walls like 1,000 invisible fingers. Then it came. 3 knocks on the door. Sharp, uneven, urgent. Not the knock of a neighbor, but something more primal. No greeting followed, no voice, just silence. Then another knock. Faster this time, almost frantic. Christina stood up slowly, heart tightening in her chest. Before she reached the door, it burst open. A body stumbled in, pale, breathless, barefoot. It was Lucy. Her hair clung to her sweat-slicked forehead like damp vines. Her skin, usually tan and glowing with mischief, was ashen, and her dress hung off her as if she'd run through a storm. Scratches and dirt marred her legs and hands. Her eyes were wild, not frightened in the usual sense, but shaken, as if she'd seen something her mind refused to accept. "Christina," Lucy gasped, the name barely escaping her lips. I saw something." Christina rushed forward, catching her as she nearly collapsed. "What happened?" Lucy didn't answer at first. Her eyes darted toward the dark corners of the room as if expecting something to crawl out of them. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a hoarse whisper, shaking with something deeper than fear. "I saw a man," she said. "Floating, not walking, floating, near Mr. Lee's grave." Christina blinked, her breath caught in her throat. Lucy's hands trembled as she continued, clutching the sleeves of Christina's sweater like a child. "He wore a cloak, long, black. His feet didn't touch the ground. And when he turned, she paused, her voice cracking. Then, in a shuddering breath, she said it. He had no face. A chill spread down Christina's spine, so sudden and complete, it felt like ice water had been poured through her veins. But she tried to reason, tried to stay calm. You were probably tired, or dreaming. It could have been anyone, just... No, Lucy interrupted, louder than intended. Then she lowered her voice again, her eyes glassy. No, Chris. It wasn't a dream. I felt it, the cold. It wasn't from the wind. It was inside me, in my blood. Christina could no longer pretend she didn't believe her. She sat Lucy down, brought her water, and listened. Truly listened. As Lucy spoke of strange winds and shifting shadows in the cemetery, of an air so heavy it pressed on her lungs, of the chants she couldn't understand, but couldn't forget. Christina tried to be strong, for Lucy's sake, for her mother's. But inside, something was unraveling. That name, Mr. Lee. It pulled at a place in her soul she had sealed shut for years. Master Lee had been more than a monk. He was her teacher, her protector. He had buried her father. He had whispered prayers into her dreams. And now he was gone. And now, someone, or something, stood above his open grave. That night, Christina didn't sleep. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew, in her bones, the silence wasn't silence anymore. Something was whispering. And it had begun again. Lucy had finally fallen asleep beside the hearth, curled up tightly as if trying to shield herself from a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Her bare feet were tucked beneath her, still caked in dried mud and scratched from her frantic run. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows against the wooden walls that twitched and danced like silent witnesses to things better left unseen. Christina didn't sleep. Even with her eyes closed, her mind was racing. Images of a faceless man hovering near the graveyard, replayed like a broken film reel. She tried to convince herself it was just Lucy's exhaustion, just a hallucination brought on by fear. But something gnawed at the edges of her thoughts, a thread of dread that unraveled with every tick of silence. She sat beside her friend, staring into the flickering flames, the bitter aroma of burnt herbs lingering in the air like a warning. Outside, the village lay dormant beneath a velvet sky. No moon, no stars, only the rustling of dry bamboo and the occasional hoot of an owl somewhere far off in the woods. But closer, much closer, Christina could sense something else. A presence. Not quite footsteps, not quite wind, but an intangible heaviness pressing against the windows. Something waiting, watching. She didn't remember when she finally drifted off, but her sleep was thin, fragile, like tissue paper stretched over water. And then, in that shadowy space between dream and wakefulness, she heard it. A knock. Click. 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 It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. It was slow, rhythmic, measured. Not like someone trying to be let in, but like something trying to be remembered. And then, a voice. Christina. The sound didn't echo through the room. It echoed inside her. Not spoken aloud, but embedded deep in her memory. A voice both strange and familiar, as if pulled from a dream she'd had as a child and forgotten. As if it came from behind the veil of her own thoughts, from a version of herself that no longer existed. She jolted awake, bathed in sweat. The blanket had slipped off sometime in the night and her skin was cold and clammy. Outside, the wind had shifted. It now carried with it the scent of something old, like rotting wood in forgotten places. John, the family dog, lay curled on the front porch. He whimpered softly in his sleep, his once bright eyes now sunken and dim. He hadn't been the same for days. He refused to eat, refused to bark, always staring off into the forest as if entranced by something only he could see. A soundless command that pulled at his instincts and dulled his spirit. The chickens had begun acting strangely too. They clucked and screeched at odd hours, refused to enter their coop no matter how Christina coaxed or forced them. They panicked at shadows, bumping into each other, feathers flying. It was as if they sensed something terrible hiding in the air, in the soil, in the silence. Her mother had noticed as well. But instead of speaking, she had grown quieter, more withdrawn. She no longer hummed songs while cooking or chatted over meals. She simply lit incense and retreated to her room, whispering prayers that were older than Christina could remember. And then came the sickness. 3 children in the village fell ill. It began without warning. No fever, no visible wounds. Just changes. Their eyes rolled back into their skulls, white as marble. Their mouths opened in silent screams, sobbing and shrieking for hours without pause, like trapped souls trying to claw their way out. Their parents wailed for help, but the doctors from town, summoned in haste, could only shrug. No infection, no poison, no neurological cause, nothing. Just something wrong. The villagers began to whisper again. Christina heard them while buying rice, their voices low and nervous. They're back. It's starting again. She didn't ask who they were. She already knew. She had seen them once, 10 years ago. Felt their breath on her neck. Heard their chant in her bones. The memory was a scar that never fully faded, only sank deeper with time. That night she didn't dare close her eyes. Instead, she sat on the floor beside John, gently stroking his bony back. His fur had lost its sheen, and his body trembled ever so slightly with each gust of wind. Through the thin walls of the house, she heard the reeds outside sway. But the sound wasn't natural. It wasn't leaves brushing or stems rustling. It was whispering. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. A voice she couldn't unhear. Come back to me? It didn't feel evil. Not exactly. It was gentle, wistful, like someone remembering a lost love. And maybe that's what made it all the more dangerous. It lulled her, pulled at the thread of grief tied around her heart. It offered closure, a reunion, a way to fix what was broken. Christina bit her lower lip hard, until she tasted blood. She rose from the floor, legs stiff, hands cold. The voice was still whispering, still weaving through the air like a lullaby for the dead. She stepped quietly into her mother's room. Her mother slept soundly, breath shallow but steady. Christina stared at her face, lined, pale, worn thin by time and loss. And beside her lay the pillow. His pillow. The one her father used every year. No one had ever moved it. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I'm sorry." Then she left. Silently, carefully, into the night, toward the forest, toward the place where nightmares had once been born. The forest behind the village had not changed. It still loomed like a wall of shadows, thick, ancient, and breathing. It did not welcome. It waited. Christina stood at its edge, staring into the tangled bamboo grove that formed a kind of threshold, a border between everything she knew and everything she feared. Her breath fogged in the cold night air. The lamp in her hand sputtered with each step she took forward, as if reluctant to light the path ahead. Her heart pounded in her ears. Every crackle of twigs beneath her bare feet echoed like bones snapping underfoot. The soil was damp and sticky, clinging to her soles like something alive. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Not the kind of cold born from temperature, but something else, something deeper. As though the forest exhaled a breath that had never known warmth. There was no trail, no moonlight, no landmarks. Only that voice, whispering on the wind like a memory spoken in reverse. Christina. Not loud, but insistent. She continued, each step a vow she couldn't take back. The forest thickened around her like it was closing in, trying to smother her thoughts with rustling leaves and damp silence. Her skin prickled, sensing movement that didn't belong to birds or squirrels or even wolves, but to something older, stranger, quieter. Then she reached it. A clearing. Circular, unnaturally symmetrical, surrounded by dead trees that leaned inward as if trying to shield the center from heaven's gaze. In the middle stood a ruined temple, or what remained of one. Crumbled pillars, moss-eaten stone, the faint outline of ancient carvings lost to rot and rain. And beside it, him. A figure, not moving, not breathing, not human. The cloak it wore was black, but not the black of cloth. It shimmered like oil on water, swallowing light. The hood was drawn, casting its face in shadow. Yet, Christina felt seen. Every thought, every fear, every memory, stripped bare under the weight of its presence. The air around the figure shimmered with frost. The wind no longer blew. The forest held its breath. And then, the chanting began. She couldn't tell if it came from the figure, or the temple ruins, or the earth itself. It didn't sound like language. It sounded like time unraveling, like something sacred being misused. It vibrated inside her teeth, in the marrow of her bones. A language not meant to be spoken, only felt. The memories crashed over her like a wave. Blood on leaves. Her father's scream. The shape of something crouched near the temple tree, gnawing on what remained of his face. The smell of iron and fire, her neck burning with pain, the darkness closing in. Her knees buckled. The lantern fell from her hand and shattered against a stone. The fire hissed, then died. Now, there was no light. Just the whispering, just the chanting, and then a voice. Come back to me. It wasn't cruel. That was the worst part. It sounded lonely, as if it wept while calling her, as if it didn't want to hurt her, but had no other way to exist. Her breath hitched. Her legs moved without command, as if her body had become a puppet pulled by invisible strings. She stepped forward, not by choice, but as if remembering a role she had once played. Then, a sound. Low, ancient, rumbling like thunder through bones. Another force had joined the forest, a chant, opposing the first, deeper, older, like a wall of wind rising against a tidal wave. The two sounds collided silently, violently. The air trembled. The earth seemed to groan beneath her feet. Leaves swirled like angry spirits in the dark. A battle of sounds, of intention. Christina couldn't understand the words, but she knew. Something, or someone, was protecting her, or at least trying to. She didn't wait. She turned and ran. Thorns tore at her legs, roots clawed at her ankles. The forest tried to hold her back, but she was faster. Or maybe just more desperate. Blood streamed from her feet, mixing with dirt, leaving a trail that pulsed like a warning signal in the night. She didn't look back, didn't breathe, didn't think, only ran. Until her home. The tiny cabin flickered in the distance, its light barely piercing the dark. She reached the yard, hands slick with blood and mud, and shoved the front door open. But something was wrong. The door was already unlocked. She froze. Her heart dropped like a stone in a well. She remembered locking it, clearly. Had even touched the key in her pocket just before leaving. She fumbled for it now. Yes, still there. Cold. Solid. Unused. The room inside felt colder than the forest. The fire had died. The lanterns were dark. And something missing lingered in the air. Not a scent, but a presence. John. He was gone. His usual spot on the porch was empty. No fur, no blood, no broken furniture, just nothing. Not even a sound, not a whimper, just absence. Christina stumbled into her mother's room, bracing for the worst. But her mother slept, peaceful, breathing, unaware. Relief washed over her and froze just as quickly. Because above the bed, drawn onto the wall in careful precision, was something unspeakable. A circle of bones. Tiny, white, sharpened at the ends, arranged into perfect symmetry. Not scattered, not accidental. A symbol, a warning, a ritual. And inside it, written in blood, her name, Christina Amanda. She knew the bones, recognized the shape, the size. They were John's. Not a scrap of fur, not a hint of violence. No sign he had ever suffered. Just gone. Quietly. Completely. She fell to the floor, hand clamped over her mouth to stop the scream clawing up her throat. Her eyes burned. Her limbs trembled. She couldn't move. Couldn't think. But she had to act. Hands shaking, she gathered what was left of John, every fragile piece of what had once been her companion, and wrapped them in a cloth. She brought them to the backyard, to the sun-warmed patch of soil he used to love, and dug with her bare hands. Fingernails cracked, dirt filled her wounds. Blood and soil mixed until she could no longer tell them apart. When she was done, she didn't cry. She had no tears left. She cleaned the blood from the wall, every drop, every line. Her mother could not see this, could not know. Christina had to be strong, because no one else would be. She sat in the kitchen that night, back against the cold wall, staring at the dying fire. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Because the whispers were still there. Not from outside, but from within. Come back to me. Come back to me. She plugged her ears, with her hands, with cloth, with anything she could find. But nothing worked. The voice bypassed sound. It lived in her bloodstream now, in her bones, in her very name. She curled into herself, rocking gently, reciting broken prayers between gasps of breath. And eventually she slipped into unconsciousness, into a sleep blacker than night. And in that sleep, she saw him. Not as a shadow, not as a rumor, but clearly. A face, not human, not mask, just wrong. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a stretched expanse of pale, clammy skin. But somehow, he looked at her. Through the flesh. Through the dream. Through time. And then came the final whisper. Closer than breath. Closer than memory. You have forgotten the contract. Christina Amanda. Christina Amanda. That was chapter 2 of Soul Possessor. But the nightmare has just begun. Secrets still hide in shadows. Spirits still hunger. And the demon is not done yet. Stay with us for the next episode. The true horror awaits. Possessor. But the nightmare has just begun. Secrets still hide in shadows. Spirits still hunger. And the demon is not done yet. Stay with us for the next episode. The true horror awaits.
Thank you for listening to Horror Audio Series. If the silence feels heavier tonight, if the darkness lingers longer than usual, you've already opened the door, and something may have followed you through. Don't forget to subscribe, because next time, it might be your story we tell. Sleep, if you can.